Hi everyone, I'm Tina Rosenberg, co-founder of the Solutions Journalism Network and co-writer of the Fixes column in the New York Times. I'm here to offer a few different ways that we journalists, especially those of us who work for mainstream media, can do a better job covering excluded communities. In 2018, the Montgomery Advertiser newspaper published a front-page editorial apologizing, as several other papers have done, for its role in slavery and lynchings. The editorial referred to the paper's false narrative about African Americans in those disgraceful days. But we know it's not just history. Until very recently, the paper put forth a different kind of false narrative. Coverage of poor, largely Black communities was limited to shootings and crime. It's not just Montgomery. Google Englewood, Chicago, or Brownsville, Brooklyn, and you'll see crime, 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 and crime, 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 public housing, and crime, including in the newspaper I work for. Every community that feels marginalized complains that the media only present its worst stereotype. And the irony is that advertiser journalists miscovered Black people even as they argued, correctly, that the national media miscovers Alabamans. Advertiser reporters told me that we choose stories that make them look like ignorant yahoos, and that's true. Another issue is that when we do cover what works in marginalized communities, we tend to choose programs run by outsiders, and the recipients are passive, that residents are passive recipients. Now we know that we can do better, but how do we do better without fluff, advocacy, and PR? One way is to do what the advertiser did and do more solutions journalism. Solutions journalism is rigorous reporting about responses to problems and the associated evidence. A good solution story covers a response and how it happened. It looks at the evidence about what worked and what didn't work. It offers insights about problem solving, not just inspiration. And it always covers what doesn't work about the response. The advertiser began doing solution stories in Black neighborhoods. This one is about a new pastor in a blighted neighborhood. He bought the lots, paid to tear down abandoned houses and build new ones, and sold them. It's now a nice neighborhood with no blight and housing values quintupled. If you want more examples, come to our solution story tracker. We have collected nearly 12,000 solution stories, and it's growing every day. All stories are vetted, summarized, tagged, and searchable. Another strategy is asset framing. The idea comes from Trabian Shorters, a former journalist and vice president of the Knight Foundation, who founded and now runs the Be Me community for Black male empowerment. Trabian created this training, but we're translating it into something that's meaningful and useful for journalists and fits with journalistic ethics. Asset framing means defining people by their aspirations and contributions before introducing their challenges. Now, we're just beginning to teach newsrooms this. If you like this idea and want to help us develop it, please find us because we're looking for partners. Asset framing draws on research about how the brain works. Our unconscious mind leaps to conclusions and sets our views well before our conscious mind can even think about it. It's the way we meet someone that determines the narrative our brain fits them into. Based on that one introduction, we connect them to a narrative we already know, and that narrative then determines what facts we believe. So if you as a journalist introduce a young man as an at-risk youth, the reader will place him in a threat narrative. He's a future criminal, undeserving of opportunity. So if your goal has been to shine a light on systemic problems, you have just primed the reader to let the system off the hook. The important point is, how are people introduced? Asset framing does not ignore problems. That would be bad journalism. You can get to challenges and problems in the second graph, but only after you introduce people as full human beings. Here's what else asset framing is not. It's not putting positive labels on suffering or bad behavior. And it doesn't mean using nicer or people-first language like justice involved or a person with substance abuse disorder. Those terms are still deficit framed. Here's an example from Soledad O'Brien showing two different ways to introduce someone. Readers can meet a girl suffering many of the tragedies of poverty, or a girl who is succeeding in school. Both are true, but which one you choose makes a big difference in the impact of the story. So we've been teaching solutions journalism since 2013, but as I said, we're just starting with asset framing. If you're interested in either of them or your newsroom is, please reach out. And thank you for listening.